let's go ahead and get started on advanced data coaching. So first I want to talk a little bit just about the process, what the weekend looks like. I covered this last time, so I'm going to run through it a little bit more quickly. Episode 1 will show up on YouTube soon, and so you can go back and look at that as well. Okay, so we start with an initial meeting, very similar to when you have in-car instruction, although this is going to happen in a classroom rather than, say, out on hot pit lane or cold pit lane. So the initial meeting will be a discussion with your assigned data coach. What are your goals? What do you want to do over the weekend and starting with the first session? Then the student will drive. We capture both data and video. We have some low-cost cameras that we stick on the outside driver's side rear window. We haven't lost one yet, but if we do, they're $80, so no big deal. So we review the data and the video and look for progress towards the goals. We look for, I meant to reword this, we look for opportunities for improvement. We set some new goals and we iterate on this. So we don't have to fix everything in the first session. One of the secrets of, working with an in-car instructor, they may come up with a list of 25 things that you need to work on. They won't talk to you about 25 things. They'll talk about 2 or 3. And the same with data coaching. We want to send people out with 1, 2, or maybe 3 goals. Ross Bentley of Speed Secrets talks about 3 goals max in some of his works. Peter Krause, a driving coach on the East Coast, he thinks 2 is the right number. So that's why I say maybe 3. We want the goals to be concrete, measurable, qualitative, subjective are the categories that I've come up with. You might think, well, this is data. Shouldn't everything just be numbers that we measure? It's a little bit more complicated. So the measurable, we'll talk about miles per hour, tenths of a G, and several other different measures, time, distance, so on. The qualitative will be the shapes of things. This is a picture that shows speed versus distance. The in-car experience for these 2 cars going through a corner is going to be very different. And I could just give a number saying, go faster in the middle of the corner. The qualitative really helps the driver sort of understand, what do I mean when I'm talking about going faster? And also we want the driver to be the data system as well. We're going to talk in some of the goals, we'll talk about the harness. When you're braking, you should feel the harnesses in this corner, similar to how you feel them in that corner, and so on. Rumble strips, curbing. There's a bunch of different things that the driver can key in on. So we want these goals to be challenging, but not crazy difficult. An important thing is for us to establish a baseline and make incremental progress. We're, doing goal setting probably about 8 times over the weekend. So we have the possibility in a corner, you may see, I need to fix 5 things in this corner. We may start with 2 and then come back with another 2 and so on. We're not going to try to fix everything all at once. We're going to try to make incremental improvement. The baseline is all about consistency, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So we're going to talk about someone called Driver 9. This is an advanced intermediate driver. We're going to see some advanced driving, and we're going to see some things that are very much intermediate driving. The last session, we used a very advanced driver. You're going to see some things that you would not see with that other driver. The car, again, 4-cylinder rear drive. It's kind of a momentum car. Things you can't cover up mistakes just by mashing the gas pedal. So these are very good learning environments, these kind of cars. So let's pull up the data. I think I gave some recommended links for some tutorials on how to use this software. I can send those out again after the fact. We're not going to talk a heck of a lot about the software itself. We're going to sort of dive into the data analysis. So anybody got a guess as to which track we're looking at here?
It's like Laguna to me.
It's Laguna. Very strong hint here in the left corner. One of the nice things about the software is I can open up multiple different windows with different views of the data. And the cursor is synchronized. So my cursor here shows up as a cursor here. So there I am in the middle of turn 5. Our basic display is time versus, some variable. I start with speed, and this axis here, the x-axis, is distance. The reason you want to use distance is so that the laps stack on top of each other. I can see what's happening in a particular spot. There's a distance mode or a time mode. Now things are all spread out. It's really hard to interpret what's going on. There are a few corner cases where you may want to look at that. Most of the time we're looking at time. So when I look at this, ideally, I'm looking at how many laps here. Looking at about 8 laps. Ideally, all these laps would be right on top of each other. In some cases, I see these data traces are very consistent. This is good. I see a lot of inconsistency in some places. Could be traffic, could be the driver trying different things, or it could be the driver needs to work a little bit on providing consistent inputs. And I typically start with a huge number of laps just to get a general shape for what's going on in the course of the session. I can't do detailed analysis with this much stuff on the screen, especially when I start pulling up different channels. So I'll tend to pare this down to something more manageable. My fast lap is the blue lap, and the blue lap is pretty much the best lap everywhere, which is a little bit unusual. There's some cases where there's another lap, there's a brown lap that's hard to see that's a little bit better in a couple places. And here the red lap is nice, but the blue lap, let me highlight it here a little bit. The blue lap is pretty representative of a good solid lap from this driver. So we'll start in, we'll narrow down the view. Let me drop out these other laps. So as I look around the track, this is turn 2 right here, this low spot. This low spot is turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, 6. This is the corkscrew, one of the slowest spots. Right around here is turn 9. This is very challenging for almost every driver. Turn 10 and 11. After a while, you get used to looking at shape, and you can, just from this shape, you can figure out what track you are and what corner you are. In the beginning, it's nice to have this little reference map that can help sort things out. So what I'm going to start with is I tend to look at the tops first and then the bottoms of this curve. So when I look at the top, get my little marker here. I see one slope here, and I see a different slope here. And I also see another slope here. All right, this third slope, I like that. We'll talk about that a little bit. This second slope, I like that. This first slope, I don't like that. I would like to see a shape that looks like the driver's accelerating, and I'm going to exaggerate how sharp this transition is, but I do want to see, not that great of braking. I do want to see a rather sharp transition to braking. I don't want to see this two-phase with the initial braking. This is a moderate brake here, and then a heavy brake, and then a moderate brake here. I want to start off a heavy brake, and then I want to ease out to a moderate brake. That's the shape I want to see. I see that here as well in turn 2. It's a little bit harder to see, but I have one slope here, and then it gets steeper by the time I get here, right? So this again is a two-phase brake. Turn 5, this is, let me get my map back up. Trust me, this is, oh, there it is. It always hides on my second screen. So this is turn 5. This is a really good place to work on it. Lots of excellent reference points for turn 5. You've got a bridge, you've got a bunch of braking markers. My advice to this driver is going to be to get to that hard brake, whatever their standard spot is, get to a hard brake right at that point. They're going to find that they're going to be braking way too early once they get to a hard brake, but we don't want to change two things at once. So get to that hard brake, and then the driver may need to do this easing of the brake a little earlier just so that they don't overslow the car. Once they realize how early they are at braking, then start moving that braking point. If you're way, way off, you could think about moving one brake marker. That's a huge amount. It might be better to start with like a half a brake marker. And as you get closer to the optimal braking point, you may start to think about car lengths and making small adjustments. I tend to think of braking as a sequence. So I don't have like one brake point. It's like, okay, this is where I start to move my foot. This is where I start to squeeze the brake pedal. This is where I definitely have a lot of pressure on the brakes, that hard brake. So if you think about one reference point, and that's the point where you move your foot, you'll need to be very consistent in everything else. So I like thinking of it as a countdown. So that's kind of my first little bit. So let's, there are plenty of other opportunities in this lap, but let me go to another view before we leave. Before we leave this. So this is longitudinal acceleration. This line right here is 0 Gs. So that would be my perfect neutral throttle. I'm applying enough throttle so I'm not slowing down, but I'm not speeding up at all. And then going downward is braking, going upward is acceleration. And if I look at the shape here, what I would prefer to see is this hard initial brake. I get up, I like this slope here. I want a similar kind of slope, but I want my maximum braking there. I don't want my maximum braking later. And then maybe I bleed off a little pressure to deal with, to prevent lockup, and then trail off braking a little bit like that. So the shape is almost the opposite of what I see here. Here in turn 5, I kind of got gradually coming up and gradually coming down. I like the gradually coming down. I don't like the gradually coming up. I want that hard braking and then start easing out of the brake. So there are two different ways to think about it. I like thinking in terms of a brake pressure profile is the term that I use for this shape here. You can also think in terms of this shape. You don't want this two-phase braking. So the next thing I want to look at is I want to zoom into turn 11. And I tend to start with a decluttered view of the track, of the data. You know, you can put like 20 channels up here. I don't do that because I want to see little nuances. And there's a little nuance there right at the bottom of that. So what do we have going on here? And let me actually make a more complicated view. I'm going to put up lateral as well. So here I've got my speed trace, and I can see I slow down and then I speed up a little bit, and then I slow down, and then I finally get to speed up. If I look at the longitudinal acceleration, I see my braking, I see my release of braking, I see some acceleration. This is actually engine braking, and then I'm accelerating again. So I don't like that little W at the bottom, little W shape. The other thing I don't like are these ripples here. Anybody know what these ripples would be right here, this changing in braking pressure?
Probably a downshift.
Exactly. Downshifts as the driver is doing, is blipping the throttle, doing a heel toe downshift. As they roll the foot over to the throttle, they're losing a little bit of pressure on the brake pedal. So we like to smooth that out. And any ideas of what's going on here with this at the bottom of the W?
That's probably getting the throttle too early and then backing out of it.
Exactly. I have another view here where I can see a GPS view of the data, and I have what I have. I have longitudinal acceleration color coded on top of this. So that's where the driver is getting to the throttle. Let's see, right there is my transition to where the driver is getting into the throttle. That's pretty early. Where they get to the throttle the second time is right there. That looks a little more reasonable. And I can see it here as well. Blue is my braking, light blue. That's my blip where I get a loss of pressure. Then I get some pressure back. And then this yellow here is my acceleration. So I got, a 1/10 of a G of acceleration, and then that goes away and I'm back to neutral throttle and then accelerate again. So I've got really two things to work on in turn 11. One is to work on that throttle blip, and then just be patient with the acceleration. And there's something kind of interesting going on here in the data. Look at the measures graph. Look at what happens to lateral G's as the driver accelerates. As the driver gets, here's my peak acceleration. Shortly after that, I get a loss in lateral acceleration. So I've got lateral acceleration of over a G, 1.1 G. It's pretty nice. Get to the throttle. Where's the weight go? Weight goes to the back tires. Now I'm down at 0.8 Gs, right? So the driver is feeling, oh, the car's not turning as well. I better get out. The driver may not be, going through the thought process of all these things. They just know, oh, it's not doing so well. Let me back out and then back in. So we want to smooth out this, and we want to smooth out this. So that's turn 11. Let's zoom back out and let's look at turn 3. And at this point, I'm going to pull up some reference data. So, so far I haven't used anything except the driver's own data. Occasionally it's interesting to pull up some other driver's data to get a sense for other opportunities for improvement. That blue's a little hard to see. Let me make that a yellow. Okay. So this driver has a little bit more horsepower. You might be able to tell the acceleration is going up much more intensely. Let's zoom into turn 3 and what's going on here. So the orange lap is an instructor. The instructor just hopped in a student's car, did one lap, came in. So this is not like the reference example of a perfect instructor lap. It's just like they hopped in a car and did a lap, so don't expect perfection. One of the things to notice is that the instructor slows down to 52 miles per hour in turn 3, while the student is going like 56 miles per hour. So the student's going way faster. But is there a problem in what the student's doing? Does the problem sort of jump out? Let me put the cursor out here, see if that gives anybody a hint. Look at where the instructor starts to accelerate, right here. And they accelerate with confidence. Look at where the student starts to accelerate. Somewhere around here is where they really start to commit to throttle. So going back to the track map, they're almost done with the corner before they can accelerate. And if you look here at the GPS data, you kind of get a clue as to what's going on here. So the yellow line, I'm not going to believe absolute position of GPS data because there's built-in error in the system, but I will believe shapes. So if you look at the shape of this orange line, what I've got is a later apex, and the car is straightening out, the driver's unwinding. In the yellow line, my student line, it's more of a constant radius. It's a later apex line, and the driver is not done turning the car until much later. There's a much tighter radius here with the orange line. A lot of turning gets done. And then the driver's unwinding. So this shows the classic advantage and disadvantages of early apexes. Early apexes allow you to enter a corner very fast, and then you have problems at the exit. In this case, the driver manages those problems by being really slow with the throttle, right? But that, especially with a momentum car, being late to the throttle hurts all the way down to turn 4. So it's not just a performance issue, it's a safety issue with a sort of, if the driver has a lapse of judgment, there's something on the track, whatever, having a super late apex, a super early apex like this is just riskier. So that would be my third piece, is to bring that in. The last thing I want to point out with this driver, if I go back to a full lap, and right here is turn 6. Let me zoom into turn 6 a little bit. And I actually have another driver I can pull up. So this is a different student. Let me zoom out just a skosh. So this is turn 6. The student we're talking about is yellow. The instructor is orange. This other student is in green. And, keep in mind that the instructor driving somebody else's car did one lap. They can probably do faster than this, most certainly. Look how close the student's minimum speed is. That student is carrying 67 miles per hour through turn 6, right? And the instructor is carrying 69, almost 70. So very close in speed. So when I look at this, there may be a little room for improvement, but this student is doing a great job. And what they're doing is early brake, a moderate brake, early throttle. And for this kind of, this is a fast momentum corner. That's exactly what I want to see. You've got to focus on getting that good exit. You could see, if that driver had a lot more horsepower, they'd get a beautiful exit coming out of that corner. As it is, that 4-cylinder is working as hard as it can to give a decent exit. So this is an example of, this is something the driver's doing great. I'd like to see the driver continue to do this. And then somewhere, maybe Sunday afternoon, we can talk about, is there a way to, go a little faster through turn 6? But for now, it looks great. So if I were to go back to my goals that I'm going to hand to this driver, I'm going to say turn 5, get to full pressure very quickly, relax that pressure if the brake was too early. It's definitely too early. On later laps, adjust the brake point. So we want that transition to full pressure. We want to build in that muscle memory, and then we can work on adjusting the braking point to something more appropriate. Turn 11, I really got a couple of goals: steady brake pressure during the blip to avoid these problems here. And then I want to see patience with the throttle. And turn 3, I need to see a much earlier apex. That'll be a safer line. And, we can worry about turn 3 after we fix that bit of it. So I talked about 3 goals. This is really a pretty heavily loaded set of 3, because I've got sub bullets and so on. With this particular driver, I would go ahead with this set of goals and just see how it goes. Is 2 goals more appropriate? Whatever that. I think this is a good starting point for this particular driver. So we plan to do more sessions like this. We want your data and or video. If we choose your data, we'll do our best to anonymize it. Videos are harder to anonymize, but we're basically, we want to talk about technique and don't want to, put anybody in the spotlight unless they want to. We do have an email list for notifications. That was in one of the emails that you got already. I've been spamming using Motorsport Reg, and I really got to scale back on that. So if you want to make sure you don't miss announcements, join this email list. You can also email me directly here as well.